Hey guys, it's Ethan, and this is a continuation of my previous video going over the contracts and offer documents you need in order to make an offer on a home. Today I'm going to be going over the disclosure package, covering what documents are essential to look at and which ones are not. As you can see, the disclosure package has a large number of documents, but not all of these are essential. Some of these, like the statewide buyer and seller advisory or the county advisory, are important to read, but they're pretty boilerplate and don't change from house to house. So you can read them once and then not really have to worry about them again. The documents in the disclosure package that are essential to look at are the home inspection, your pest inspection, the transfer disclosure statement and seller property questionnaire, or your TDS and SPQ, the preliminary title report or your prelim, and then your natural hazard disclosure or your NHD. Let's go ahead and get started by looking at the inspections, but I first want to brief you on how you should be looking at them, as well as what mindset you need to have. Understand that both the home and pest inspection are meant to scare you. They're meant to list out every single detail that's wrong with the house, but this is kind of a good thing because the more detailed the inspection, the better, and it means the inspector actually did their job. And I would rather you know everything wrong with the place before you buy the house rather than after. Also keep in mind that a house will never be perfect. Any repairs that need to be made should be factored into the purchase price, and you should feel at ease knowing that your agent will guide you through the process of finding good, reliable contractors, even after close of escrow. Home inspections are super important to look through because they'll tell you what's wrong with the property. They serve as a good base to give you an idea of the property condition, but they often miss a lot of vital information you should know before you actually make the offer. The following is what I check for on every single property. I first check the electrical panel. The electrical panel can cost roughly 8 to 10 grand in the Bay Area to replace, so making sure that it's good is a huge factor. Check to see the voltage of the panel. Some older 120 volt panels might not be enough power to supply a modern home, especially if you have a lot of electronics or an electric car. Newer panels are usually 240 volts and provide double the electricity to your home, meaning you have enough juice for all of your electronics. Also check to see the brand of the panel that's installed in the house. Panels made by Zinsco, Federal Pacific, or Challenger should be replaced immediately because these manufacturers went out of business and the panels are known to be fire hazards. Check the electrical wiring and the plumbing in the house always. Older homes used aluminum wiring, which increases the risk of electrical fires. They also only last about 50 to 60 years. The last time aluminum wiring was up to code and allowed to be used in new constructions was around 50 to 60 years ago. If you see a home with aluminum wiring, I would highly encourage you to put in copper ASAP. Plumbing is also something that you really need to check. Make sure that the water supply lines to the house are copper and not any other sort of material. Waste lines can be galvanized steel or plastic. These don't matter as much because they're just leading water away from the house rather than something you would use or drink. But these also only last around 50 to 60 years before they need to be replaced. It'll usually say in the home inspection what pipe material you have, but you can also check by looking at the water main to the house. The water main is usually towards the front of the house and usually has a big handle on it that shuts off all water to the house in case of emergencies. Look at the pipe connected to the water main leading into the house, and if it looks green like the Statue of Liberty, you're good to go. And if you're still not sure, you can scrape your key a little bit on the pipe and it'll reveal the color underneath, and if it's copper colored, then you're good to go. I always check the roof. You need to know what type of roof you have, how long that particular type of roof lasts, and how much it'll cost to replace. The average asphalt shingle roof lasts around 25 to 30 years and costs around $15,000 to $20,000 for the average home. The home inspection will most likely give you an estimate of the roof's age, but won't make any comments on how soon you need to get it replaced. If you have a 22-year-old roof that has zero leaks or issues, the home inspection isn't going to say anything about it, but just know that in the next 5 to 10 years, that roof is going to reach the end of its service life and it's going to have to be replaced soon. Always check the HVAC and furnace. A furnace and AC condenser usually lasts around 15 to 20 years, with the furnace costing around 8 grand and the AC costing around double that to replace. Lastly, always check the water heater. A water heater only lasts around a decade or so. After that, you should be mentally prepared for it to break down and needing to have it replaced. I want to pause and just say that if you haven't noticed already, I'm covering very big ticket items that can cost tens of thousands of dollars to replace. Home inspections often miss a lot, so you might need to check these items while you're at the house. The pest inspection lists out any termite, fungus, or dry rot issues with the property and provides bids to replace or repair. The items are separated by importance using numbers. Section 1 items are issues that need to be addressed immediately, and if you're using something like an FHA or a VA loan, the lender will require you to repair anything before the close of escrow. With a conventional loan, they usually don't care to see the pest inspection though, so just keep that in mind. Section 2 items should be addressed, but the house isn't going to be severely damaged if they aren't addressed immediately. And then lastly, Section 3 items are more suggestions that the inspector has noticed, but they're not necessary to complete. They would be nice if they were done, but again, not essential. At the end, there will usually be an estimate for repairs, but again, don't be scared or discouraged. The cost will just need to be factored into the purchase price. Moving on, the TDS and the SPQ are nearly identical. They're both forms that the seller fills out to give you information about the property. The only difference being that the SPQ is more detailed than the TDS. These documents protect you as well as the seller. The seller has the opportunity to tell you anything major about the property, and you have paper evidence of what the seller gave you about the property before the sale that can be used if fraud has occurred from the seller's side. Both documents follow the same format. There are a bunch of questions that the seller marks yes or no to. Anything marked no, you don't have to worry about. Anything marked yes, pay attention to, and there will always be an explanation below on one of these lines or an addendum. The prelim or preliminary title report can be a bit daunting, but I promise you, it's pretty simple. Whenever you're looking at the prelim, it'll state who the owner is of the property, what type of property ownership they have, and if the title company is going to be giving you some form of title insurance. The most important aspect is making sure the title company is going to be offering you title insurance. If they are, then there's nothing to worry about, and you don't have to worry about any issues with the chain of title. You or your agent should also check to see that the sellers of the property on the prelim match the signatures on the disclosures, but most likely the listing agent has already checked this. Also, you can quickly verify that the property is owned as fee simple. This is the highest form of property ownership and means the seller is allowed to do whatever they want with the property, including transferring title without any issues. Some things you can also check for on the prelim are any outstanding liens on the property, as well as any easements. A lien is a financial interest in the property from someone who is not the owner. These can be things like a second mortgage taken out on the home or even a mechanic's lien, resulting in the seller not paying a contractor for work that was done. An easement can be a neighbor or a utility company's right to come onto your property, either to get to their own landlocked property or to come onto your land to fix something like a utility line. Lastly, let's take a look at the natural hazard disclosure, or the NHD. This is uber important to pay attention to, especially in California, because buying home insurance here can be a nightmare if you're in certain natural hazard zones. The first section here is where you can see any environmental hazard sites. It shows any chemical spills in the area, any gas lines, or any government correction sites that need to be cleaned up. The most important two items that you're going to see on this particular map are the gas lines and the underground leaking storage tanks. Gas pipelines are usually indicated by these blue lines, and we're really just checking to make sure that the line doesn't run directly under or right next to the property. If anything were to ever go wrong, the last place you'd want to be is directly over or next to a massive gas pipe. Underground leaking storage tanks are also really common, and most of the time it just indicates that there's a gas station next to the house. All gas stations store their gas in underground storage tanks, and it's common for them to have some sort of leaking. Of course, this isn't great for the environment to have any type of chemicals or gas leaking into the ground. This is generally not a deal breaker unless you're growing crops on your land or using a well as your water source. Of course, the rest of the items are important to check too, but they're just way less common. Every inch on the map is around a half a mile, so while things may appear close, they're probably farther than you think. The most important page to check for on the natural hazard disclosure is right here. You will see that there are several zones that the property can be in: a special flood hazard, a dam inundation, a high fire, a wildfire area, an earthquake, a landslide, or a liquefaction zone. Each hazard zone ranks from not ideal, but not a deal breaker, to you're not getting home insurance. A dam inundation zone and a liquefaction zone are not ideal, but also not a deal breaker. The majority of Santa Clara County is in a liquefaction zone. This is when clay content in the soil is high, making the soil susceptible to shifting over the years. If you have to buy a home in Santa Clara County or the Bay Area, this is a concession you will have to make because mostly all the houses are all in a liquefaction zone. Dam inundation zone means the home has the potential of flooding if a dam in the area breaks, but your lender will not require you to purchase flood insurance because the chances of this happening are quite low. The United States has strict regulations on upkeep and maintenance of dams. There are also protocols in place in case of high rain or flooding. Again, being in a dam inundation zone is not ideal, but really not that big of a deal. Special flood hazard areas, earthquake zones, and landslide zones are zones that you really have to think about before you purchase the home. You have to ask yourself, do the pros outweigh the cons for this property? Is this deal good enough, or do I love the home enough to take on the risk and pay a bit extra for insurance? If your home is in one of these zones, you should be able to get home insurance, but you're going to have to pay extra for coverage depending on what type of zone you're in. Being in a special flood hazard area means that the government has deemed that your property has a 1% or greater chance of being flooded every year. Your lender will require you to purchase flood insurance in order for them to give you a loan for the property. A regular insurance property is maybe $1,400 a year for a regular 3-bed, 2-bath house in a neighborhood that's not in any hazard zones, but if you need to purchase flood insurance, it's going to cost an extra $900 to $1,200 a year for the average property. This is a very real cost that you need to keep in mind when you're trying to budget out if this home is going to work for you. California is prone to earthquakes, so being in an earthquake zone shouldn't be taken lightly. Earthquake zones can cause the soil to shift and your foundation to be damaged if one were to ever happen. If you're in an earthquake zone, you will want to buy earthquake insurance, which can cost up to a couple grand per year depending on how expensive your home is. Being in a landslide zone is also very expensive to buy extra insurance for. With prices in the Bay Area, it'll most likely cost thousands of dollars per year. I'm talking upwards of like $3,000 a year, and for earthquake and landslide zones, the price of the insurance scales depending on how expensive the property is. So the more expensive the home is, the more expensive the insurance is, but the cheaper the house is, the cheaper it is. I don't say this lightly, but if you're in a high fire hazard zone, it's kind of a really big deal in California, and not in a good way. Most homeowners insurance companies aren't offering policies in California, even if the property is not even in a single hazard zone. But given the fires that have been happening all over California over the past couple of years, most insurance companies won't touch any house in any sort of fire hazard zone with a 10-foot pole. You will not be able to obtain insurance policies from any conventional insurance companies, and instead you'll have to opt for the California Fair Plan, which on average costs around $3,200 a year for bare minimum coverage, which only pays for very basic coverage, covering things like fire, lightning, and internal explosions and smoke, while regular insurance would come with coverage for theft and other things. I hope this video helped you understand how to take a look at disclosure packages while you're shopping for a home, and the best advice I can give is to read everything and ask your agent questions if you're not sure. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.